Corona Diary Day 10. Today I want to talk about theodicy. If you look up theodicy in the dictionary, it will say to justify the ways of God to man. God's ways need to be justified because of our experience of suffering and evil in the world. One of the reasons people or early Christians and Jewish texts as well deal with this question is, how do I actually account for evil if God is all good? One early Christian solution to this was to attribute evil to another force in the universe. So there are two powers, a force of good and a force of evil. So that it cleanses God of the taint of evil, but it makes it problematic because God now is no longer all-powerful. In any event, it's a complicated question to answer philosophically. And people have come up to ask me, because somebody actually called me a representative of religious people, which I decline. And they asked me, is God responsible for the coronavirus? And I have been thinking about that question and ways to answer it. And of course, the answer to that question is I don't know, or it's very complicated, or let's think about it together for a while. Milton, as I was mentioning, his famous work, Paradise Lost, is a theodicy. And maybe I can try to explain my response to this question by talking about why Paradise Lost is so great. Paradise Lost is so great because even though its intention is to justify the ways of God to man, Milton allows the reader the full experience of suffering and evil in the world. He doesn't actually try to clean it up, domesticate it. That is, at the same time that Milton is asserting God's providence, asserting God's mastery over humankind over time, Milton still allows for the experience of this world. And in some sense, the reason that Paradise Lost succeeds as a theodicy is because it fails. Theodicies that succeed are just cartoons. And in a way, the person who asked me, is God responsible for this, is asking for that cartoon. In a way, we look askance at at religious fundamentalists or religious fanatics who hold this cartoon version. But the question, is God responsible for this, is in a way kind of asking for that cartoon. Please tell me a story. I don't believe it from anybody else, but maybe I'll believe it from you. Maybe I'll believe the story from you. So it's not only the ultra-Orthodox or the fanatics who hold to this story, this narrative, but it's people who are craving that certainty. And real theology always will accommodate complexity. So when I tell people, when they ask me about theodicy, read Hamlet, read Milton, and the response often will be, but I want to know what you think. And the only way I can tell you what I think is through using the developed language in literature and philosophy for the past 2,500 years from the traditions that are available to me, the Greek, the Christian, and the Hebraic, and to try to use those languages, not because I'm not a 17th century Puritan, and that's what Milton was, but still there's the language that he uses to help understand the problem. What we need to do is to make the questions that we ask interesting. And we want actually to think about the divine in ways that are more complicated than those of the people whom we reject out of hand. Meaning, some people like me, academics, intellectuals, will reject everything that a certain kind of religious culture, let's say a redneck culture in America, imagines, except when we reject a conception of the divine, we reject their conception of the divine. Let's accommodate a conception of the divine which allows for complexity. And this is a time to think about those questions, to think about our place in the world, to think about how we're going to tell this story to ourselves, because I think that's really what is imposed upon us. What's imperative for us now is to find a way of telling the story of what's happening in such a way that makes sense to us and our children. So to paraphrase or to change the Clash song, I'm so bored of theodicy.